Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is supported by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, Telecommunications Access Minnesota, and Nisswa Tax Service. Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Across from City Hall in Nisswa and online at nisswatax.com.
There are two issues facing scientists and governmental leaders around the world besides climate control, or climate change, I should say. A lot of people believe in it and a lot of people don't. But these other two issues, really, most people agree there are problems that are developing very quickly. And one is food production. There's a real concern if we're going to have enough food to feed the people of this world. And the other one is fresh water. There are water-rich countries and there are water-poor countries, and often those water-rich countries have no way of getting the water to the poor countries. So it's creating some real dilemmas. Newsweek had an article about 2 weeks ago called Liquid Assets, and it's looking at some of the companies who are investing in fresh water around the world. And one of the places that they're investing in is in Sitka, Alaska. Sitka is a community of about 10,000 people, geographically spread out pretty wide. One of the lakes there is called Blue Lake. This lake is so clean and so pure that the water can be taken out of the lake, bottled, and sent to foreign countries without having any other treatment to the water at all. So this is an interesting dilemma that's developing in the world today. And by the way, both of those companies are American companies. Part of that water is being sent into the east, India. The other part is being sent into Dubai and some of those countries where there just really isn't a lot of water. So we live in a very, very water-rich state. And the question that people are asking in Minnesota is how good and clean is our water here? And there's been probably for quite a while, Western states have been looking at ways that they could tap into some of our water resources in Minnesota and get them out to the Western states, Colorado, Nevada, and it hasn't happened. One of the places they looked is Lake Superior, and because it involves 3 or 4 states and Canada, it hasn't been something that's been easy to deal with. So tonight, we're going to be talking about Minnesota water. How clean is it? How safe is our water? What's happening to protect our water? How much of our water is impaired? And is it something that we are at risk with in our own state? And my guest this evening is Marion Bender, who is the Executive Director of Minnesota Waters, website minnesotawaters.org. Marion, that's a long introduction, but welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what Minnesota Water does, and I know you're not into selling water or drinking water to people, but I think the important thing that I would like to get across to people tonight is that we're going to be talking about lakes and rivers, but all of our water is interconnected. The groundwater is all interconnected, and there are some real issues evolving here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, maybe we could just talk about what is Minnesota Waters.
Minnesota Waters is a nonprofit organization, and we work across the state to help citizens take responsibility for, take interest in, and take action to save our lakes and rivers. Because really, our lakes and rivers define this state. It's on our license plate. 10,000 lakes. You and I know it's more closer to 12,000. And our incredible rivers, our incredible freshwater supply. And we're blessed with these wonderful resources, but sometimes we take them for granted. And the way we've loved them and enjoyed them and lived by them and recreate on them sometimes is threatening to their health. And so what we're all about is helping citizens who really care, and we work with citizens around the state, to take action on their own or to form a local group and to take action in their community to save or protect or improve the lake or river in their community. And so what we do is a small nonprofit. We're based in St. Cloud, but I've got staff around the state. We work with citizen groups like lake associations and river conservation groups. We provide them training, connections to technical assistance, connections to funding, and general support so that they can turn their concern about the health of their lake or river into action.
I think you said there are over 700 lake associations in Minnesota.
Does
that sound about right? That's an incredible amount. And what is it that they all have in common?
They all have in common a desire to protect something they love. And in some cases, especially in this area where we're blessed with some really high quality lakes, it's protecting them from some of the threats that are facing it. The state demographer has projected that the biggest increase in population growth in our state over the next 30 years will occur along the Mississippi River corridor between the northern metro and Brainerd. And that's going to put a lot of population pressure around our lakes, especially as we come up into this region. And we've seen population pressure, and as you get more and more homes around a lake, particularly more people living around them year-round, we've seen some real impacts to water quality. And so what we need to learn as a state is how to enjoy these beautiful resources but not love them to death. And there are some wonderful groups that have formed, many in this area as well as in all parts of the state, that get together just to talk about their lake, what's going on, to find out more, to assess the water quality, to find out what natural resource agencies are working on it and how they can get involved. And some of them, we work with groups that go all the way, that take so much action to improve the behavior of all the landowners around their lake, but then to work with local policymakers, because a lot of the land use policy has a huge impact too. And they work together with the resource agencies. And I just, I have the pleasure of going and meeting these groups, these citizens. They're volunteers. They take their weekends, their nights, a lot of times their days, to get involved and to take action.
One of the things I found unique about your particular organization is, and some of the writings that you have, is you're really trying to find ways to take care of our lakes without more regulation from the state or from the federal government. And we live in really an anti-regulatory era right now. And I think if people understood what you're doing, I think there'd be a pretty widespread support for that. Could you just talk a little bit about what you mean by that? Mm-hmm.
Well, what I've said is that if we can take responsibility for our actions and learn how our actions, you, me, everybody who lives in this state, if we can personally think about how our actions impact the health of our lakes and rivers, and I don't mean just the people who live around them or recreate on them, that's all of us. There's going to be, if we understand how our actions impact it and we maybe change our behaviors a little bit in order to create less of an impact on our water quality, we're not going to need more regulation, which is not only bothersome but costly. It costs a lot for our counties to enforce things like Shoreland Rules, and it's a lot of work and a lot of money, and we all know our state's in trouble on the budget side of things. So what we're looking for is a way that let's not cause these problems in the beginning. Let's not need the hard hand of the law to come down upon us. Let's make those right decisions. And how can we do that? And we try to train people how their actions can impact the lake and why they should perhaps develop their lakeshore lot a little differently, or make sure their boats are clean when they're going fishing, and all these different things that we can all do. Keep their septic systems inspected and up to code, and there's many things that we all can do that can make a real impact on our lakes.
It's really interesting. I think when most of us drive by a lake and look at it, it looks clean. Mm-hmm. And I know I had a report from some folks, I'll just say in western Minnesota, in a community where there's very high levels of arsenic being found in their drinking water. And I've had Pollution Control Agency folks onto this program before, and they've talked about how they just don't have the staff to really be able to go around and assess all of these lakes and rivers in the state to see if they're clean. And there's so many things that could be technically wrong with them that we just don't know by looking at them, and really don't know when we assess them, and when we're doing a technical assessment to see if they are clean and pure. Right. And does your organization help people do assessments?
We do. It's one of one of my favorite programs. It's a program that we've been doing for a long time. We actually worked with the MPCA, the Minnesota Pollution Control Association Agency, to create a curriculum to train citizens to monitor the water quality. A lot of your viewers may be familiar with a Secchi disc, which is a white and black disc that you drop down, and you can see that just checks clarity. Like last year in June, we could see 30 feet down. Now this year, we can only see 25 feet down, and that's actually a pretty good reading, by the way. But citizens are really able pretty easily to take more involved samples and to get those samples to a lab to be tested and to be assessed. And things like phosphorus, chlorophyll A, all these things that really determine the health of the water and how is it healthy enough to swim in? Is it healthy enough to fish in, to eat the fish from? Is it healthy enough, for fish habitat and other reasons? And so we need to have those readings. And you're right, there's not enough. With 11,841 lakes, there are not enough state staff to do that. Nor are we ready or willing to pay the taxes to pay that many people. So why don't we get citizens involved? And the citizens who do this love it. They know from month to month, from year to year, what is the health of their lake. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? What can we do to impact that? And Minnesota Waters has a closely held value called the data to information to action pathway. You can do some good things, you know, in any area of your life. You can just say, well, I'm going to do this. This is a good thing. But is it really going to be the most important thing for your lake? You need that data, that water quality data, to guide your actions. And then you're going to be much more effective. And so we always encourage our groups, lake associations and river groups around the state, to get, if you can't find the water quality data from a local agency that's collecting it, start collecting it yourself, and we can train you how to do that.
I know there's a report that's coming out this winter, I think, maybe, or this spring from the University of Minnesota, their Water Resource Center, with perhaps proposals of a plan, a state plan. Could you just talk just briefly about what that is that they're looking to do?
Sure. The legislature asked, or actually contracted with the Water Resources Center at the University of Minnesota to prepare a framework of what we need to invest in as a state over the next 25 years, that's the time span for the report, in order to improve and protect our waters. And that includes groundwater, drinking water, lakes, rivers. And so they've been working on this for about a year now. It is due to be released to the legislature by mid-January. And I was fortunate to play a role on the citizen engagement aspect of that. We went and did some outreach and some listening sessions and some surveys and some meetings with citizens and stakeholders around the state to put input into this process. It's going to be an incredibly wide-ranging report because we are talking about infrastructure in cities. For drinking water, for sewer, for stormwater. We're talking about lakes and rivers. We're talking about the agencies. Right now, you know, there's quite a lot of agencies that are involved. Could that be fixed a little bit, that system? We're looking at regulation. Do we have too much? Do we not have enough? So there's so many things that they're going to address. Basically, this was driven by the constitutional amendment. 33% of that sales tax amendment that the people of Minnesota, go team, passed a few years ago, goes to clean water. And that's a huge, huge issue. And the legislature must appropriate those sales tax dollars as they come in. They decide where it goes. And not every legislature has a degree in hydrology and limnology, so they're looking for guidance on this. And they asked the Water Resources Center to compile experts from around the state to come up with this report, and that will be due in January.
I look at some of the groups that are working on water stewardship, really. Pollution Control Agency, Department of Health, University Extension, County Environmental Services, Soil and Water Conservation District, Watershed Districts, Conservation Districts, it goes on. There are quite a few. Is there any organization to these groups, or are they kind of all going in their own different directions?
That's a loaded question. At times, especially when we work with citizens who are trying to get a question answered, it seems like they're all going in different directions. And even within these agencies, if you call one person, are they going to know? Or is that person dealing with water quality and not with shoreland use? Or is that person dealing with drinking water but not lakes and rivers? It's very complex for your average citizen. We do a whole workshop on it, how to understand these agencies and how to get the help you need to take action for your lakes and rivers. We do a whole workshop on it. We have a table that had to be put on a legal-sized sheet of paper. There are a lot, and each one of them has different jurisdiction. In some cases, if you're a lakeshore owner and you want to put some sort of structure on your property, you may need to talk to 3 or 4 of them. Sometimes it's just one if you get the right one first. But it is a challenge, and that is something that this framework is going to look at. I know Senator Mary Olson from Bemidji has convened a stakeholder group to start talking about that. How can we kind of whittle this down and make sure that this is a little more user-friendly, a little more accountable, and a little bit less redundancy? I
remember seeing your name on the letter to the editor of the Minneapolis Tribune about the governor sort of rejecting the Shoreland Rules. And I know, I don't remember what month it was here, but it was in probably late summer that the Minneapolis Star-Tribune did a feature on the development on lakes. And when they were showing some aerial views of the development, it's pretty incredible. And I think in fairness to landowners, it seems that there just are so many rules that maybe are on the books, they aren't enforced, or maybe they aren't even on the books in some of these counties. So it's really kind of a muddled mess, isn't it?
Well, it's a little bit of a muddled mess, and I think you hit on a key word, which is enforcement, and that's hard because you can make wonderful regulations. Regulations, I shouldn't say wonderful, but regulations that are really have the goal of protecting the resource that we all share and that we all love. But if they're not enforced, you're still going to have the impacts. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the impact of this, of really heavy population growth around our lakes, and we are loving them to death, and water quality is going down. What people need to realize is that when water quality goes down, your property value goes down. And that's directly out of a big study done by the University, Bemidji State. Did a wonderful study on that where they really showed the correlation, and you can see a distinct drop in shoreland property values, which impacts the tax base and property values. So it's important that we have a baseline of what we can do around our lakes and rivers. And the state Shoreland Rules were not something that said everybody has to do it this way. One of the key goals in the development of these new rules, which haven't been updated for over 20 years, and you know it's different.
Because I think it was the governor that asked for that study to be done, or the legislature asked for that study to be done. And there was really a huge amount of input across the state into that particular proposal. So I know people were very disappointed when, and I'm not trying to get into the politics of this, but the governor sort of tabled that and said, come back later, didn't it? I mean, isn't that basically what he said, come back and look at it again later?
He actually kicked it back to the legislature, and he would not sign it. He was at the DNR did as the legislature requested, had the input, drafted the rules, their commissioner signed off on it, then it was to go to the governor, and then it went through it was to go through a public review process through the administrative law judge. And all rules, state level rules, go through that process. And the governor held on to them. They were on his desk for quite a few months. And we thought that perhaps he might just let it go and let the next governor deal with it, which would be unfortunate because we were ready to see these things implemented. We thought they were a great thing. But instead he rejected it. He said, I will not sign them. He sent a letter to the commissioner saying, I will not sign them. These are state command and control mechanisms. It didn't have sufficient public input when it actually was a result of the biggest public input process the DNR has ever done. He said it didn't have enough public input and it goes to the legislature, let them deal with it, and you figure out how to deal with this working with the legislature and get more public input. And that's what that letter back to the DNR said, and I was just amazed and heartbroken because our organization spent an incredible amount of time going through those rules with the DNR, stakeholder groups from around the state. People traveled. I worked on one team with a county commissioner from Coochin County who would come down for a meeting every month to St. Cloud. And he did that volunteer. He wasn't paid to do that. And there was a lot of public input, and a lot of people spent a lot of time. And for the governor just to say, no, that was very heartbreaking.
So that's still on the table, and who knows where it's going.
A lot will depend on our election results.
The next governor, the next legislature, you bet. Does your organization get any of that money, the new legacy money?
Not at this time. I wish I could say I did. As a nonprofit, it's been a pretty rough past couple of years. But no, at this time, the state, all the dollars that come in through that state sales tax increase are appropriated by the legislature, and the legislature will not appropriate to nonprofit groups or only to government agencies. And so it can go to the DNR, to the MPCA, and to groups like Bowser, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, which helps get money locally, but again, only to local governing units like counties and soil and water conservation districts. So we're working through that. That is actually a point that we pushed in this framework from the university to say that some of this money needs to come down to the citizen groups like the lake associations that we work with that voted for this amendment, that want to do good things for their lakes and rivers, and they should be entitled to use some of that funding.
So your organization helps citizens work with agencies. Mm-hmm. What happens when groups find out that they do have impaired waters? What are some of the options they have?
It depends on what the impairment is for. And there is this overarching state process that actually comes down from mandated by the EPA, the federal program, called TMDLs, Total Maximum Daily Load, which is a process that basically requires that you assess the water, find out what's impairing it, that you find out where it's coming from, and then you make a plan on how to address those inputs. And some cases, a lake that looks pretty hurting a little bit can actually be fixed with a couple things done with the city redirecting some pipes, some stormwater pipes or things like that. It can be a simple fix. In most cases, we're dealing with non-point source pollution. That means water running off of properties, often private properties, maybe a small township, maybe just a lot of lake homes around, maybe agriculture, maybe parking lots in the vicinity. I know a lake in the metro that's heavily impacted by parking lots off a shopping mall. Once they paved all that space for those parking lots, the water quality went way down because all that stuff was washing directly into that lake. So there's various things that can be done, but a lot of it is going to have to be a voluntary landowner action. There's no regulation for non-point source pollutions. It's going to take changes in behavior, and the state isn't quite, our agencies aren't equipped to deal with that very well yet. Minnesota Waters can be a big help to them, and we're working with some different groups to get the citizens engaged in this planning process. Okay, now we've learned where the stuff is coming from. How can we change that? How can we put in rain gardens so there's not so much lawn waste and lawn chemicals coming off our lawns? How can we put in more holding ponds so that we can kind of filter some of that water first? How can we restore some of these wetlands that we filled in so that they can help us filter the water? So there's just a number of things we can do. How can we clean up the septics around our lake? How do we work with the farmers in our area to reduce agricultural runoff? And so those are some of the big, just top of mind things that you can deal with in impairment, but it really depends on where that stuff is coming from.
So probably really important to realize that all water running down a street is going somewhere, isn't it? I mean, it's going into water that we either drink or play in somewhere. It doesn't matter what town this is at, it's going somewhere. And I know that the farm community has probably been beaten up a bit over the years, especially when you look at the Minnesota River, because there is a lot of agricultural runoff there. But my experience has been that most farmers are good land stewards, and when they know what to do and the right thing to do, most of them will do it. Does your organization or others spend time with the agricultural community trying to help them understand these issues through their organizations?
At this point, we're working, Minnesota Waters doesn't have a big role in that area, but we'd like to, because we work with these lake associations where maybe half the lake is ringed with homes, but then you've got lots of fields on the other side, or maybe a feedlot in the vicinity that's impacting it. And so that's an area that we want to move into. At this point, most of the support for the farmers comes through soil and water conservation districts, NRCS, some of those agencies that are more used to working with farmers, and crop advisors on those issues. So I wish I could say we're doing more in that. It's something we should work on, but not right now.
When you look at the distribution of lakes and rivers in Minnesota, are you finding that the lakes to the far north are usually cleaner, or isn't that necessarily the case? Because I would think there's fewer people that are on some of those lakes, fewer communities around them.
That in general and overall, I guess we could kind of say that. I did have a interesting trip as I work with groups around the state. I was recently in southern Minnesota. The Tri-County Coalition of Lake Associations down in Le Sueur and Blue Earth counties. And I started talking about, what you just asked. What can you do when you find out your lake is impaired? And I said, well, if you find out your lake is impaired, and someone stopped me and said, Marion, all our lakes down here are impaired. And that just really hit home. And that was just kind of sad for me because, I work with groups who have these beautiful lakes and they're saying, gee, our clarity was only 32 feet this year. I'm like, whoa, you're lucky. There's wonderful lakes around the area, and especially in this area, that are so clean and so beautiful. And I don't think they realize how lucky they are, because different factors have impacted these lakes, and particularly shallower lakes are really suffering. So around the state, you'll see a lot of great lakes up farther north with less development pressure. There's a number of beautiful lakes in the western part of the state that I learned about this year too in my travels. Otter Tail County, 1,000 lakes in that county. You don't really think about that, but just a beautiful combination of small farms and little lake communities. And
there are a lot of them in that Perham area, all through that area.
It's amazing.
How can people get a hold of your organization if they're interested in helping?
Well, I appreciate that. Best place is our website, minnesotawaters.org, And there's a big button on that homepage that says join. We ask people to become members so that they really show that they agree with our belief that citizen action and citizen engagement is really going to be the key to saving our beautiful lakes and rivers.
I think that really is a very unique approach, because you are not looking at policy and regulation as much as volunteerism and getting out there and finding out what the problems are and figuring out ways to fix it. I had the opportunity a couple of times to work with a local DNR with some of the lake associations, and we spent some time in the summer out looking at just what you're talking about, water clarity. And I know homeowners on these lakes are absolutely very interested in doing the best thing, the right thing. And we didn't get into the invasive species. I know there's a lot of issues here. Invasive species, I think in the emails we've exchanged, there are no silver bullets. It's coming, isn't it? I mean, we got zebra mussels in central Minnesota. Mille Lacs has got a pretty large, healthy population now. We just found some in the Gull Lake area. To the lakes and the rivers to the south of us, there's more and more of that happening. It's going to be almost inevitable. We're going to all be dealing with these issues too. I guess in your organization, you're looking for money. I would guess there's always, you never turn down the opportunities.
We're a nonprofit, yes. We need to fund our staff, and our staff has a lot of things they want to do.
And I know the last couple of years have been really tough on nonprofits around the United States, just because of the economy. It's been very tough. So it's minnesotawaters.org. Citizen action groups is really what you focus on.
Yes.
I think you're doing some really good work.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
Keep it up, and thank you for appearing on the show. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You bet. I'd like to have you join us in 2 weeks when we'll have who I believe is one of the really outstanding naturalists in the United States. His name is Stan Tequila. He has authored over 200 books. He has taken photos in every state in the United States of America, South America, Mexico. He follows birds. He follows patterns of birds. He's absolutely a fascinating man. I think you'll enjoy seeing him. His name is Stan Tequila, and that'll be at our next show in November. You've been watching Lakeland Currents, where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until next time.